A warm welcome to Diplomatic Channel, our first edition in 2025. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week on the program, we're setting the tone for Nigeria's foreign policy by highlighting areas of focus for the Tinubu administration. Nigeria's foreign policy under the present administration has identified key elements codenamed the 4Ds: democracy, development, demography, and diaspora. Former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Keshi, kicks us off on this conversation by briefly reviewing the country's foreign policy in 2024. Joining us now to discuss Nigeria's foreign affairs and Nigeria's foreign policy in 2025 is former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Keshi. Ambassador Keshi is joining us from the UK this time. Thank you for joining us on the program, and a Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too, Amarachi, and wishing you all the best in 2025.
Wishing you the best as well. We decided to kick off the year's conversations with you, Nigeria's foreign policy in 2025. But before then, how would you rate Nigeria's foreign policy in 2024?
Well, it's been a sort of mixed bag. And you will recall that the last couple of months, the conversation has really not been on what has been done or not done in terms of the execution of Nigerian foreign policy, but in the absence of ambassadors in most of our missions. Hopefully, for whatever reason, one reason that was given was the lack of funds. But I think I've seen some write-up and some figures that the budget of the ministry has been increased this year. Hopefully that would take care of the problem and will strengthen our diplomatic missions in terms of funding. It of course contributes a lot to their ability and capacity, to protect or act on behalf of the country itself without getting into unnecessary trouble.
Right. And the issue of appointment of ambassadors has been a thorny one for over a year now. Nigeria's had no ambassadors in any of its foreign missions outside of the country, and the president has been making these foreign trips. How much do you think that affected our image abroad and some of these meetings that he had overseas?
Well, if you know how the structure works, no matter what happens, the civil service and the diplomatic service have been trained to work even in the worst circumstances, and so you'll find that even without the ambassadors in place, they charge their affairs, who, by the way, are also senior officers, potential ambassadors themselves, step in to take charge of the missions. And they are supported, very well supported by the ministry itself to ensure that there are no slips, when the president visits. And of course, it takes a lot of toll on some of the officers themselves when they do not have all what is needed to execute, to perform, optimally. But I think that the fact that the president has visited so many countries and we have received no incidents of protocol, there have been some pictures showing some protocol failures, not on the part of the Nigerian diplomats, but the inability of some of our leaders to agree to the line of protocol. But the truth of the matter is that I think that the officials who served in some of these missions, they charged their affairs, and as I said, most of them potential ambassadors. I think they've done very well, under these circumstances, and we should commend them and recognize the tremendous, pressure they've been put into without resources, to work with.
Do you think that the president or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs propagated Nigeria's foreign policy, as well, much as you understand it, in such a way that citizens recognized it as foreign policy?
Well, it's interesting. I like that question. To start with, there are principles and that guide foreign policy. But as far as the people are concerned, when the president travels to engage his counterparts or to attend a conference or the rest of it, most people, of course, say that is advancing, executing Nigeria's foreign policy, even if they are not very sure which aspects, is being executed. But they just say it fair, and with the global television and the media, the president is seen as working in the best interest of the country. And in any case, at the start of even though the president, and I must say this, even though in the last 2 years, I'm not too sure, and I stand to be corrected, if the president has made any major speech on foreign policy to give us, an insight into the principles that are guiding the current foreign policy of Nigeria. At the advance of this administration, the foreign minister actually laid out 4 cardinal principles, which again was designed to strengthen what has been done in the past. And I think development, if I remember clearly now, development, demography, diaspora, and one other one that I can't remember now. So I want to believe that some of their trips, they've been, and I think democracy, they've been, when you look at some of the agreements that have been signed, they're all designed to attract foreign investors into the country. But my only problem is that I'm aware of the fact that so many MOUs, so many agreements have been, signed in the past, and many of them lie, unattended to or not implemented on both sides.
So do you agree that the president's shuttle diplomacy in 2024, something he started in 2023, he's made over 120 trips, I think, and counting, between 2023 and 2024. You don't think that those trips that he made were really worth it? In some instances, they were.
No. To start with, the president, let me correct you, because we keep making this allusion to shuttle diplomacy, which was popularized by the late Henry Kissinger. I don't think the president has been engaged in shuttle diplomacy. He's simply been traveling to a number of countries, either to honor invitations or to attend some meetings or conferences, and the rest of them. But like I said earlier, anytime the president goes out, it is seen and truly true that is in the advance of the foreign policy of Nigeria, which of course is based on Nigerians' own national interests. And the president and his party and his government, they have things they want to achieve, in the 4 years they have. And if they believe that, for example, they have focused essentially on investment, on getting investors, to invest in Nigeria. I think the question should be, where our focus should really be, how many of these investors are coming in, and how is that affecting the economy of the country? That's the best way we can judge them. But if all the trips, that are undertaken by the president, yes, MOUs are signed, promises are made, and at the end of 2024, if we do a very good analysis and we have a very good data, collection to indicate whether, foreign investors have come in or they have not come in, that will give us a very good idea on how successful all these trips are. But bear in mind that a few, 2, 3, or 4 years ago, about 3 years ago, NBS published, published in one of its reports, indicated that most of the, well over most of the foreign trips, engaged by the country, practically they're very little in terms of foreign investment. So which leads us to again say that maybe we should begin to look inwards, not only to see how we can encourage domestic investors, but make the environment conducive.
Let's go to our other West African neighbor, Ghana, which last week announced visa-free travel for African countries. In January of last year, Kenya announced the same thing. I think Nigeria has an almost similar thing, only it promises visa on arrival. Rwanda already practices visa-free travel for Africans. Is this a precursor, do you think, to calls for integration in Africa? Would it lessen travel hassles?
Do you mind if I ask you a question on back on that? Did that free visa travel these countries are putting in place, did they include or exclude Nigeria?
No, they include Nigeria. Rwanda, in fact, allows everyone to come in visa-free, at least for a certain number of days. And then if you have to stay beyond, I think, 3 months or so, then you do need to get a visa.
Well, good. Look, these things I had hoped and continue to hope that it will work well for us. The onus now is not on those countries. Those countries have made their overture. I think we should begin to, encourage our people that when you go to these countries, for goodness sake, behave. Because in countries where these things have been tried and they've reimposed visas, is because, Nigerian travelers, particularly traders and people who have no business doing that in the first instance, made a mess of themselves, not of the nation itself. And in that process, gave, a bad name to Nigeria as a whole. So our campaign now should be that those who want to go to these countries, should place the good representatives of the country. But it's something good. And we should also extend the same facilities to those coming to, to Nigeria. I actually think that if the African free trade is to work, this is among the things that we need to do. Open up the borders to everybody. The fear in the past has always been that, because Nigeria has such a large population and Nigerians travel a lot, Nigerians will empty themselves into some of these countries. But the fact that others are not even worried now shows you the confidence they have that no matter the amount of Nigeria that comes into their respective countries, they can handle it themselves. And in any case, Nigeria, wherever they go, to show some dynamism and encourage the citizens of that country to see opportunities that they've not seen before. I've seen this happen so many times, and I think that it will be good for African countries to open up their borders, to one another, and you will see how the dynamism will change in each of these countries. But it's a good development, and I sincerely hope that we too will do the same thing, particularly to other African countries. We're already doing it in ECOWAS, so let's open up our borders to the rest of the world.
Indeed, and it might reduce the travel to European countries as well. So I know that at the end of the month is the Africa Union Summit, which all African leaders at least attempt to attend. The first meeting in the year, they all make it to Addis Ababa, which unfortunately has been struck by an earthquake, a 5.8 magnitude earthquake this weekend. So we don't know exactly how that meeting would go. But how well do you think that Nigeria has influenced AU decisions and policy under this present administration? Is it too early to tell that?
It's too early to tell that, number one. And I think some of these questions are based on, is it nostalgia of what we did in the past? Bear in mind, and I think analysts should bear this in mind, that in the past, there were defined issues that was common to everybody. For example, decolonization was one. We're ending the apartheid system in South Africa was one. And that brought, the whole of Africa, together. But things have really changed. We do not have that. The only issue we have today, which is not seen as which in one way is seen as a collective issue, but in a different light when you talk of the decolonization process and the anti-apartheid struggle. the issue of development, because everybody is pursuing a different development trajectory and the rest of it, you know. So it's too early. It's too early to judge, because there's been no central issue that has required Africa collective, decision. One issue that could have done that was the issue of what's going on in Israel, in Gaza. But somehow, I just think that Africa has chosen, to stay out of it, except South Africa, that took a very good and, commendable initiative to take the matter to the international court. I wish the whole of African nations have really supported that, and and make that point very, very clear, because we did this many years ago in supporting the Arab cause, and the Palestinian cause, and I think we should continue to do that as the years go by. But the truth of the matter is that there are no central issues that require that activism, that dynamism you saw in the early 80s and the 90s.
Is that because the AU...
We should have a different parameter for judging this time around. By the way, the first meeting, I'm not too sure, except they've changed it. Oftentimes, the first meeting of the year does not involve heads of state, except they've changed it. It involves, ministers, because it's a budgetary session. But as I said, maybe they have changed it over the years. I don't know. But for years, the first meeting, which is held in...
Here's where we pause for a break on the program. Ambassador Keshi has other areas to address. Don't go away. Welcome back. Former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi, has been addressing spillover issues from 2024 that could and would need Nigeria's attention in 2025. Let's head back for the conclusion on his thoughts. So you mentioned that there's been no central issue for the AU to address, and too early for this administration to address as well. We're turning on 2 years with this administration, and then would you think that the African Union has been so watered down in its policies, in its approach to global issues, that it really is just a retreat, I guess, for African leaders every time they gather?
You're right. There's no doubt about that AU has sort of, I'm trying to find a better word for this, but when you look at the fact that a couple of years ago, and folks like me, as my generation, as we grow older, we have a lot of nostalgia about the past. When you think of the fact that on a number of issues that affected the world in the days gone by, AU, beginning from OAU, came together to address those issues, even as far back as the early 90s to early 2021, again, when NEPAD, was put in place. Again, that was for the collective economic development of the African, nations. So now I think what they need to do is to try and see whether there are issues, there are global issues, no doubt about that. But whether Africa sees itself strong, capable, strategic enough to be involved, it's another issue. But for me, I do not think that our regional organizations are really expressing their way, as strong as they should. Oh, and by the way, this is also some views expressed by a number of commentators as regards the effectiveness of the United Nations itself. So a lot of things have changed globally, and we need to recognize this.
Yeah, there are lots of calls for reforms in the United Nations. Let's move on to our relationship with the United States. And President-elect Donald Trump will be taking over as president on January 20. Of course, there are two sides to this. Those who think that America's foreign policy towards Nigeria will not change. They feel that Trump will simply carry out what is in the interest of the American government. But there are also others who say we need to worry about, Trump's position on immigration. What is your take on this? Well,
look, Trump hasn't come to office yet, but his policy on immigration has been a little bit watered down by Elon Musk and some of these tech giant folks. So it will affect Nigeria in two ways. If they maintain that policy of only giving visas to people with skills and knowledge, that would help the American economy, particularly the tech industry, to grow. Nigeria has nothing to worry about, But if it has to do with ensuring that immigrants who have no reason to be in the United States or are criminals coming in the first instance, yes, that would certainly affect Nigeria to start with. But look, I think that we should begin to look at Trump very closely. He's trying to do things differently from what he did when he was president some 4 years ago. For example, unlike the 4 years ago when he thought that when he put in a lot of unnecessary drama in the selection of his team, he's been more careful, more calculating, in selecting the type of people that he's putting in office. Somehow I begin to feel that those are the people we should worry about. And as we speak, even though he has named his foreign policy team, I've not heard one person named as the Undersecretary for African Affairs yet, because that's a very crucial, post. That's the gentleman or the lady that actually reaches out and liaises with African countries, Now, whether, throughout the campaign, the only time Trump talked about Africa was in a negative sense by mentioning, again, on immigration and mentioning Congo. Now, whether Africa would be a priority under the Trump administration, we all know the truth. It's not going to be. So we should take our own destiny into our hands and not think that President Trump cares about us. He doesn't care about us. He cares for two things, himself and America, period.
As we end this conversation, Ambassador, do you think that in this 2025, with everything you have said and the analysis you have provided, that President Bola Tinubu will need to travel some more to garner more foreign investment for Nigeria?
Look, one of the things I find amazing when I hear even governors traveling out and everybody traveling out is the fact that people outside the world and everybody tells you they know Nigeria. They can Google Nigeria. They've heard a lot of Nigeria. Even, what do they call it? Our music, the Afrobeat, folks who are doing very good publicity for Nigeria. People know Nigeria. They know the potentials of Nigeria. And for goodness sake, these potentials have been known since the 1960s. Go back and read foreign papers when Nigeria became independent. The problem is that we've not been able to fix a number of things at home. Get the institutions. Our institutions are not working as they should work. Get a number of things done at home and see whether foreign investors would not come, even in spite of the chaos. There are those who come to Nigeria believing that they can make money from the chaotic situation they see in Nigeria. And guess what? They've actually made money. Nigeria can do better if it spends more at home. We need to build skills. And for me, that has become more worrisome as I travel these days and watch, a number of television. You see what young people are doing, particularly in Asia and the Americas. The new technologies that are coming in place that we are not even aware of. But we have to understand that is the age in which we are going to live with. So we need to have people with those kinds of skills. And that means we have to do a lot in our education. We have to do a lot more in our health system. But above all, we got to make the environment friendly, not only for investors, but also for Nigerians. If you do that, and the message gets out on its own, and look, it will go, and the government doesn't even need to engage in the propaganda it does these days, because there are enough people in Nigeria to sell the country. both in and out, Nigerians outside, Nigerians inside. They're doing good job in doing, whether negatively or positively, they are capable of selling Nigeria. So if we can get our domestic environment in, make our institutions work very well, believe me, investors will come because Nigerian potentials have been known since the 60s. And guess what? We have not even scratched the top of that potentials. So let me just end by saying what Yeri said many years ago. To President Yeri, look, your country has so many things and this and so on. It has great potentials and so on. And Yeri's simple answer was that, yes, we have oil, for example, but you know what? Of going to look for the oil and the profit is very limited. In our own case, it's the reverse. We have all what it takes to be a great nation. Let's work on making Nigeria a great nation.
We'll leave it at that. Former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi, thank you for setting the tone for us and hopefully for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2025. Thanks again for joining us on Diplomatic
Channel. Thank you very much and Happy New Year again.
This is where we end the program this week. Other issues we missed out, let us know in the comments on YouTube or any of my social media handles showing on your screen. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.